Thank you for through our technical difficulties here. Mr. Smith, I think you have a packet for us.
We do. This is a continuation from last week for the proposed transportation fees, charges, and fares. I guess we'll just go ahead and jump into each item the committee has to consider based on the executive's proposal. So we'll revisit Bethesda. The executive's proposing increasing spaces within the right-of-way public streets from $2.25 or less per hour to $4 or less per hour. Council staff is okay with this primarily because it's revenue neutral and will help with demand management. Last time the committee and Mr. Friedson, District 1 council member, expressed concern, and Mr. Roshdi expressed that the council can kind of set it wherever we want, $2.25 or higher, lower. Again, the recommendation is $4 or less per hour. Sorry, council staff is just going to go line by line for each thing since those are all in the resolutions and in terms of what the committee needs to decide.
And Mr. Friedson's strong recommendation was not 4, but did he arrive at a number?
He did not.
As I indicated, our intent was not to raise revenue through this method. It's only to create parking within the high demand area in the business district, and it's a practice that it's being used in many other jurisdictions or urban settings throughout the country. And if you feel too strong about the $4, then you can go $1 over $2.25, because the idea is not only go up, but actually in some area we come down. And it's only a very specific on-street parking that we feel that this will help the businesses and the community.
Thank you. I do think it could be an effective way to keep street spaces open. And I think a lot of people have, time is of the greatest value. And so they want to pop in and pop out for whatever reason. My only comment on this, and this is friendly, is like, it's possible that that level of cost is not enough to actually incentivize people to use the garages. And what you're articulating is the possibility of creating a differential, and so that'll move people towards the garages, but people may shrug off the additional expense. It may not result in any delta. So we'll just monitor that as we go. I only say it because you said it's not our intent to raise money. If you don't create the delta, then you may end up raising money, and we haven't solved the problem of keeping the street spaces open.
Not changing behavior.
But let's see if this works. If this does work, I think it will be a benefit to the businesses there to be able to, so that customers know that when they go to Bethesda, they don't get into the habit of saying, whenever I go there, I never get a space. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Right. Mr. Roshdi, how do you measure success?
Well, measuring success in terms of parking management in the area.
Changing people's behavior to get them to select.
Well, I measure success for
street space.
First and foremost, customer satisfaction. We are providing a service to the community, and it's the satisfaction that is very critical to me. And part of the reason for demand pricing is actually to improve customer service.
Sure.
As I said, there is no intent to actually raise revenue. Now,
do you have a quantitative analysis of parking space availability on the street before and after you change the rates?
yes, actually, when I mentioned in the last session, and also I shared this with the chamber when I met with them, that we will work with the chamber, we will work with the community to decide, okay, what are those streets that really could benefit from this variable rates, and what are the hours that we're going to be doing this, and what are the streets, and then go from there, and then see what the result is, and if we need to adjust, we will adjust. Go ahead.
So will you be able to say, I appreciate all that, and I do want to see you working with the chamber and local businesses that might not be members of the chamber or other stakeholders in Bethesda, nonprofits or others, but will you be able to say, at 2:25 from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. we have this many space hours available, and at for, we have this many space hours available.
Certainly, and in working with the other businesses, I understand that not everybody are member of the chamber. First of all, one of my goal as a director of this department has been to be very, very responsive, not only to the council members, which I have had the pleasure of working with all the 9 members, and we are a very responsive organization. We respond to our emails, we respond to calls, and we respond to people who have a problem. And if some businesses would like to have a conversation with us, I'll be happy to go. We are actually scheduling meeting right after the budget season in the new fiscal year with all the regional advisory committees to talk about what our budget is, what is it that they're expecting for us to do in their region, and answer questions. So if there are meetings that you feel that we get invited, we always attend. Go ahead.
Joe Stamana with DOT. So yes, before we do any kind of demand pricing, we would do a before occupancy and we would do an after occupancy, and it would not go up in terms of rates. We wouldn't go from 225 to 4 in one shot. We would probably start with a 50-cent or $1 increase, see how that changes behavior, or if it changes behavior. And if it doesn't, we can measure that. We would then take the next step and see how far it goes. And you're right, it may not change behavior at all, but we won't know that until we try it. So I think it's a good way to manage demand, and we want to try this out and see if it really does affect availability.
Sure, Evan.
So I know we started this conversation last week, and I still remain confused as to how this is revenue neutral. Can you expand upon that?
So if we were able to move people, we are taking somebody, again, we're taking a typical block, say 10 parking spaces, and we're moving 3 of them from a $2.25 an hour to a $1 an hour space. We are getting some additional revenue from the remaining 7 spaces, but that's not going to cover the cost for the differential. So even if there is a small increase in revenue, it'll be so minute that it wouldn't make much of a revenue impact in the grand scheme of things.
But then the other part of that is on a street itself. There are locations that we could reduce the price, let's say in Bethesda, below the current value, current hourly rate, because there are available spaces. So it works both ways. It's not only to increase the price to create these additional spaces. There are areas that have ample parking space, and usually there are 10% or 20% empty. So maybe we can reduce those prices as well to actually balance. And then I want to say this too. If we raise it and we see that it's still completely taken, we may just go back and to our neutral status. There is no reason to, because our intent from this is to follow what the industry standard is, and it has been successful in other jurisdictions.
And so the revenue that would be gained from the higher rates would be offset partially by lowering rates in certain areas, although it sounds more like what you're saying, it will be lost revenue from the more frequent vacancy of those higher cost spaces. Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
How do people find out about lower price spaces? Are there apps I'm supposed to have on my phone that would tell me, oh, if I'm parking on Woodmont Avenue, I'm paying $2.25, but if I'm 5 blocks away, it's lower?
Actually, this is one of the items that we discussed with the chamber, because somebody who's driving by, we probably have to put signs that is clearly visible. And so but our meters have an hourly rate,
Right.
but I don't think it makes any sense for somebody to go and park and then realize that this is a more expensive area than some of the
And once
others.
you're there looking at the meter, you're
But
probably
people
not gonna
will
look at it.
learn. I mean,
You have to plan this into your trip.
But the typical users will learn quick that which blocks are the high, more premium than some of the others.
routine
Routine
commuters
users,
that are
yes.
going to the same dry cleaner day after day.
Yes.
Right.
They will
Okay.
reduce.
Yeah, the intent is to change the regular behavior, the regular commuter's behavior. So if it's somebody that's visiting that area all the time, they can then make that choice to move to a different area versus somebody who's just a one-time visitor.
Right. Okay. Well, Hans.
Oh, is it turnover that you really would kind of track? Is it the number of people who are able to park there that day? Does that indicate?
The standard is 10% availability.
So it's availability is what you actually track? Okay.
You go during peak period and see how many spaces are available on that block, and that determines if the price is too high or if the price is too low.
Did you have
I was just going to say that a typical on-street meter is an hour or 2 hours limit anyway, so you would see that turnover every hour or 2 hours.
Well, I appreciate the need for management. I appreciate the need for the differential. I want to be sensitive, and I'm glad you're going to work with the stakeholders and calibrate all this in ongoing basis. I want to be sensitive to the local district council member and his expertise. I mean, I'd propose going to like 325, and you can report back, on how that's working.
I would go with the department's recommendation here. I think the chamber is okay with it as far as I understand. That's what I've heard. So not that the chamber is, but the fact that the chamber is okay with it is telling. I would say that. So personally, I would stick with the department, but.
I appreciate the information regarding what the chamber's position on this. And what I just want to make clear is that whatever clearance we give in terms of increases, that is not the new policy starting July 1st.
That is correct, sir.
And if you could restate how you are, for the record, tell us again how you are methodically thinking about implementing this program, if we do allow up to a $4 rate?
Well, you're not going to see $4 rate on the street anyway in July. You may see a 50 cents increase in some roads, some blocks, such as Woodmont Avenue, because it's always 100% full when you go there. And I go to that area quite often. And then you may see lower than 225, which is today rate is in some other blocks that are showing 20% availability. So that's probably the immediate, not necessarily July 1st, might be August or September, after we do some studies. And then if we needs to go to another 50 cents to see if the 10% availability is reached, and then we go from there. But by all means, this is an authorization by the council to have the capability for demand pricing. It's not that, and the reason we chose $4 is because we felt that at the maximum that it may need to go, it may be $4. It may not be next year. It may be in future. We got the similar kind of a authorization for garages, and it was shown to be very successful.
And how long a time period would you need to enact this at that 50-cent rate increase with a few areas being reduced, as you said? How long before you report back to us and let us know how this is going?
Well, actually, based on what Joe's just mentioned, people have to get used to the new prices, so they will adjust their behavior based on, once if they come and see it's a 50 cents more per hour, they may decide to go to the garage next door rather than parking on the street. So we have to give that a little time, maybe 3-4 months before adjusting the price. You don't go, sooner than that. We need to have enough time for the typical or routine users of those on-the-street parking to get to understand what the rates are, and then if the behavior doesn't change, then maybe we just notch it up one more time.
Given that this is going to be a slow rollout, I am comfortable with the chair's proposition of increasing $1 for those rates, and then we can continue this conversation, since this is not going to be a quick fix, and it's going to take you time, it's going to take the community time, and then we can continue this conversation.
Thank you. 2-1.
Yes, it
Mr.
is.
Smith, we haven't gotten very far.
I'll move faster.
It's not your fault.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
Okay. Hope so.
That'll clear everything out for other conversations, since we've now talked about demand management, et cetera. The only other recommendation that the executive and DOT have made for Bethesda is the daily parking permits to go from $12 a day to $15 a day, just to align them with the current garage rates. Council staff has no problem with that.
Fine by me.
Okay.
Without objection?
Okay.
All right.
All right, moving on to Silver Spring then. We'll deal with the several items at first. So the executive is recommending changing the rate for all parking spaces on street, garages, and lots in fiscal 19. However, that is not included for the Fenton Village area. And then on Circle 11 is a map of what Fenton Village is, considered by the executive, the boundaries for it, the garages and the spaces. Apologies if it's not color for everybody. The online version is color. This map would show what rates remain the same in Silver Spring for Fenton Village for fiscal. They would remain the same as what they currently are in fiscal 19. So the rate increases that the executive's proposing is for every other garage, lot, and space that's outside of the map. The on-street is expected to go from $1 or less per hour to $2.25 or less per hour. Similar to the Bethesda conversation, hopefully truncating this conversation, that's also just for demand management. The actual revenue generation will be coming from the proposed increase for the surface parking lots and parking garages, going from 80 cents and 70 cents respectively to $1.25 or less per hour. So I'll stop there and let the committee address those all parking space rates.
I gave my speech about this last week, but I do feel like the Silver Spring Urban District, or Commercial Business District, is really it's a fragile retail ecosystem. A lot of businesses some have gone out of business, many are struggling. Retail across the country is struggling. They have been through a lot of disruption, not beginning with the transit center, but including the transit center, including a lot of utility relocation and pipe replacement and the Pepco upgrades and everything they're going through right now. And they have much more on deck, including the Purple Line construction on Bonifant and a lot of Red Line delays and other things coming up this summer. And to me, I am very sensitive to the initiation of night and weekend revenue in the parking garages, the impact of that on the retail environment there, and also to the steep proposed increases in the daytime. And I am not philosophically opposed to that. I know these are public assets that we should be charging something for, and they go to an important public purpose. But I think if we're going to do a big change in this area, we should have a good public education process that includes, and I've spoken to Mr. Roshdi about this, includes some survey or focus group or whatever about the impact on local businesses that includes local businesses. And I certainly believe we should have a daytime meeting with business owners and possibly a nighttime hearing with residents to educate them about this whole process. Many of them certainly don't even know we have parking lot districts, that there are capital needs, that there are service improvements that need to happen, that the money stays in Silver Spring and doesn't go out countywide, that it's not paying for teachers and firefighters, it's going to business-friendly improvements in Silver Spring, and that we use those forums to educate the public and build support for them, and then initiate fee increases, probably sometime in the fall once there's a public education process like that in place. That's my suggestion. To avoid the sort of rollout we have that we had to clean up later with the dockless bikes, which was another good thing, but certainly could have been rolled out better. This is I see Jane nodding, an important public purpose, and I think people need to see the trade-offs and what the money's going to if they're going to absorb the costs. And it also will allow us to get through some of the summer construction. But I think we could have a meeting like that. I would be happy to help publicize it, and I hope, Mr. Roshdi, your staff would. I know you can put on great public forums that are very helpful at educating the public about the process and the trade-offs,
I would think that we could do something like that by, by June.
I would be happy to attend any meeting that you schedule with the community, businesses, and individual. As I said, my job is to serve the community, and I take pride in that. In terms of the rates, I feel a little bit, because a number of years ago, I sat at this same chamber, and I alerted the council, T&E at the time, of course, you were not as part, that because there is a lot of funds available in the Silver Spring, but when you look at the long term, because we have zeroed the tax, the annual $8 million that was coming from the tax is no longer coming. So within the 6-year fund balance, you couldn't see that steep drop. But now you can see it. On page 7 of the other packet, you can see that without increasing the rate in Silver Spring, which purely pays for the operation of the parking lots, parking garages, and the transfer to urban district, which provide enhanced level of service at the urban district in the Silver Spring. So you can see that from FY21, your rate, you fall behind, and actually it goes minus 29.9%. This is on page 7 of the packet number 2. So, and then the night and weekends rate proposal is really for FY21, so you will have that chance to deal with that at that time. However, I would strongly recommend that you consider the rate increases that we propose. It's not that steep. If you don't do it now, you have to take much higher rate to actually keep the fund balance to stay at least above 25%. That's the thing. Because if the sooner you start, because if you start in 20, then you will have lesser reason for increasing the rate later. So,
As I said, I understand it's an important public purpose, and we need to change the trend here. The other thing we did when you were recommending this in this chamber was we agreed to a loan to the Bethesda PLD that hasn't been repaid and in fact has been kicked down the road. So that's also part of the reason for the fund balance in Silver Spring.
but the 3 million, even if it was paid
I
back
understand
this
that.
year, it would
And
not.
again,
make
I'm
any
not
difference.
arguing against changing the cost curve, but we should do it with a transparent process that the public understands.
Because currently, with
Glass.
no rate increase, it's 4.7% in FY21.
I think no one's advocating for no rate increase. I think we do this after a public process. Mr. Glass?
So the perspective that you just shared in the off years about the insolvency of the PLD, I want to pick up on that because currently 40% of the parking spaces in the Silver Spring PLD are vacant. And that the drivers, the number of drivers who are parking there have decreased by approximately 11% over the last number of years. I think since 2010 I have. So that begs the broader question of how sustainable is this type of funding system for the needs of the CBD PLD?
Well, it provides maintains the parking facilities. It provides funding for the enhanced service within the business district. And by the way, I should have pointed this out that the rate increase that we are proposing, garage 60 and 61 already at $1 per hour. So they're higher than any other garage. So what we were proposing was only to raise the 125 in 60, 61, and 58. That's it. And then we were planning to actually reduce the rate to 70 cents in garage 3, 4, and 5. So it's not that all of them going to be going to $1.25. And 2 of those garage, which is always 100%, almost 100% full, is 60 and 61. And we are only asking to go from $1 to $1.25. And the other thing is,
So let me re-ask my question. If parking has declined in the PLD by 11% over the last 9 years or so.
You mean available parking
Uh,
or amount of people parking?
sorry. Per capita. That's so. per capita basis. For the number of people who keep moving to downtown Silver Spring, clearly are not bringing their cars at the same rate as there once were. And so this model is predicated on more people driving to Silver Spring, but
Not
clear.
necessarily, no.
Well, so it's I want to understand the business model here, because it seems like it's unsustainable.
Right, no, that's not the case. Go ahead.
So we conduct occupancy studies every month in all of our facilities, and we're not seeing the downward trend in occupancy in our facilities.
Okay. So a conversation that we recently had, that we've tabled for later this year about transportation demand management. I want to enter that into this conversation to better understand how we navigate this, because I do associate myself with some of the concerns expressed by Mr. Hucker, in that the dynamic of the conversation we just had regarding Bethesda, there was buy-in from the community and the business community, and we don't have that buy-in in Silver Spring. And the CEO of the chamber is nodding. And so I just want to try and figure this one out, recognizing the financial situation and the fragile ecosystem of the community. And so going back to TDMs, when we engage in that conversation, talk to me about this holistic approach.
Well, one of the aspects of this is increasing population in these areas, and I think the statistic I think you were referring to was that as more residents have moved to Silver Spring, perhaps they're bringing fewer vehicles per person than they were before. And that is exactly the sort of behavior that we're hoping to encourage through the TDM program. What that means is we don't need to deliver parking spaces at the same rate as we increase the population. So we have a pool of parking right now, and we've done this analysis in Bethesda responding to the downtown plan that was adopted not too long ago, that as the growth occurs in Bethesda, the parking supply is appropriate for the 55% mode share. That's an increase of 20% and a significant increase in population without growing the parking supply. That doesn't mean we need to shrink the parking supply. It means that the supply we have now can serve more use in the future, and a smaller proportion of the overall population will be driving. So I think that's what we're hoping to see with this initiative, is that we can get more productivity out of the resources that we have in the infrastructure that we have by increasing the use of alternative modes. That's the relationship between the TDM program and the parking program.
And to elaborate a little more on Mr. Hucker's point, I don't think members of the community understand what the parking rates and what their parking fees actually go towards. And to have a community conversation where they understand that it goes to red shirts, and it goes to maintenance, and it goes to making the community as clean and vibrant as it can be, I think will go a long way to helping bring people on board and educating them as to why this is an important thing to do. And so I agree with the chair that before I approve any of this, I want to have that community conversation, that public education component, and then revisit this after that.
I think you were a former head of the Silver Spring Citizens Advisory Board, weren't you?
I've done a number of things in downtown Silver Spring, and as I shared last week, the very first time I ever testified before County Council in that chair was to fight against nighttime parking meters till 10 o'clock, which for the new residents who had moved into Silver Spring would have created chaos over a decade ago.
Anyway, consistent with what you were talking about, reducing the number of spaces, we have not added any parking space in Silver Spring at least over the past 15 years that I've been involved with this program. Not only that, we actually dispose Garage 21, which is now the United Therapeutic headquarters. So the TDM and all the other thing has helped to reduce the demand. That's why with the population growth, we have not increased any parking. But the parking is critical, and especially to the businesses. If we don't have the sufficient fund to manage the garages, so ultimately they have to be shut down. And
then ultimately, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, it is for me, less about the parking and about having some of those spaces available or what some of the rates might be, but it's what that money goes towards. And the red shirts and the community at large, making sure it is clean and functioning well. And the question about the business model here, that's where I'm going towards. That if the upkeep of the central business district, AKA the parking lot district, is dependent on these, that makes me concerned moving forward as we can continue attracting residents and encouraging residents to be without their cars. So, I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. In the big picture, I think it would be great for us to have, well, Fed handles the urban district,
And that'll be tomorrow.
and then we're taking that up tomorrow. But I do think we need to talk about the correlation between the PLDs and the Fed and the urban districts. I do want to say, if your hope is that we're going to explain how the PLD system works to residents, that is that's an uphill battle. I think Glenn is the only person not employed by the Department of Transportation who actually understands that. So
Stick to the basics.
I think we probably stick to the basics there.
Most people don't know they exist. Some people don't know we have a county
Exactly.
council,
Well, there's that other
or that
problem, but
we set the rates for this.
you know, it's one of the county's enduring mysteries. But I do think that, I think we need to be talking about how to fund more services in the urban district in general. And I know there's been talk about a bid. I think we need to explore all the options. I support the recommendation. I would also like to add services. You know, the fact is the fiscal health of this fund is bad, and the longer we wait to make a change, the more jarring that change is going to be. That's the basic problem. This is like fixing Social Security. If you wait 20 years until the shortfall is 20%, then you have to raise taxes 20%. But if you start now, then you just have to raise it by a fraction of a percent. So if we delay, then we're going to be announcing something that takes people by surprise even more. And I don't know how many people are really even going to ever participate in any event that we host. You know, let's assume that a fraction of a percent is actually ever going to hear what we say, and most people are just going to experience what policy is put into place. So the surprise is going to grow the longer we delay. I don't know that there's any way out of that. So I would recommend to my colleagues, it sounds like you're settled as to where you are, and that's fine. I would think that this year we could at least go to $1 to sort of step towards the funding level. The fund shows that even once the loan is repaid from Bethesda, you know, it's not long before that money's burned through, and you're deep in the hole. So we have a fiscal problem in the PLD itself that we need to fund, but that's not even really the big picture. The big picture is we don't have enough services in the urban district. We need to be adding more services to the urban district so that it can be even more vital and more vibrant. I think the fact that that the former Discovery headquarters was just leased, 20% of the building just leased up in one stroke, that is fantastic. That is really because of the vibrancy and the interesting opportunities and the restaurant scene and the brewery scene, and all these things that are happening in Silver Spring. And you know, we need to keep pressing that forward. And the way to do that, one way to do that is with more feet on the ground in the urban district, you know, more staff, more support, more cultural programming, and all these kinds of things, and more security. I know the Chamber's been asking about security issues. I think that's a real issue. We want to stay on top of that and make sure that there's no reputational issues that we ever encounter. So, you know, I was going to suggest, it's a little late, but I was going to suggest a graduated approach here. You know, my first reaction when I heard about this proposal for changing the rates of street meter parking, I was like, oh, there's street meter parking in Silver Spring? Because frankly, I never use it. I always go right to the garages. You know, because you know what? You can't get a spot in Silver Spring. The only time I ever get a spot in Silver Spring is if I'm off hours. Otherwise, I mean, do you know anyone who's ever gotten a spot on Fenton in between Whole Foods and the Civic Center? There's like 8 spots there, and they're always full, and I've never had one in my entire life, and I've lived there for like 15 years or whatever.
Stay out late enough.
Well, if you go off hours, you might get one. I don't even know about that though. That's stretch right there, So it's like, who's getting those spots? In any event, street parking is very hard to get in Silver Spring, and that may have an effect on businesses that need turnover, that need turnover in the spots. So I think that generally speaking, moving towards management, we're going to get into some of the other issues about gated garages, I guess, subsequently, and maybe there's more agreement about that. But I think we are succeeding in Silver Spring. I don't think it is a place that needs to be treated as though it is struggling and behind the times and not anything other than a successful urban center. It's not maybe it's not fair to get square, but I think it's doing really well. So I guess I'll just say my piece, unless there's interest in looking at a graduated approach to the fee increase, which I would really support going at least to $1 this year. And I would like to add more services this year. I mean, I hear the chamber about adding services. I would do that this year. I would add more security this year. I mean, I'm totally willing to support that as well. But I think the fee issue, we have to grapple with. So that's my piece. I think it's probably 2 to 1.
I think it is. We can do a meeting like this in June. We can revisit this.
So my understanding is you don't want to raise the rate at all this year, so we can make let you know that what you need to raise it next year just to be afloat. That's it. Not even meeting the fund balance target that you have established.
Why can't we, Mr. Smith? I thought we were able to raise it in the late summer or the fall.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
This is not a tax rate issue. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a
no, you
resolution,
can,
so
but I thought, I misunderstood that.
No, I'm basically saying delay this a few months so we can have a real public education process. I totally agree, I know the chamber does, for the need for enhanced services. And you have to pay for those. And we're never going to be able to get the services I think we want, and the security we want, and the physical upgrades we might want, and a new garage we're going to need at some point, unless there's more public buy-in. And right now, there's a whole lot of public opposition to this. And to be fair to the process here, I will remind you, we sat here last year and I said before that we don't always do our best policy decisions in the middle of the budget mayhem. And before you came back with a proposal to do nights and weekends and to raise the street parking and the garage parking, let's do a forum like this. And I offered my help, and there hasn't been any forum, so here we are again. So I understand, Mr. Reamer, but if you weren't here last year, you wouldn't necessarily know that. And I think we should do more public education like this if we're going to avoid a public backlash for the council voting for things like this without any public debate.
Although we do not discuss the county executive budget before it is advertised on January 15, or in this case.
But this has been a perennial proposal.
But I tell you, in the last few years, we have communicated with both chamber, our proposal to the executive, and I went to the Silver Spring Citizen Advisory Committee with the county CAO and Joe's. I was out. But anyway, we go, and if you schedule any other meeting, I will be happy to come.
Okay. Mr. Glass.
I want to put a fine point on this because all of us are in agreement that services need to increase in the downtown area. Again, interchangeable PLD, CBD, whatever we want to use. But drilling down on this, the rate increase that you're proposing, does that come with an increase in services? Or is that just a cost of inflation and other measures?
It's only a stay at the current level.
Right.
With a very minor increase in security services, very minor.
Which goes back to the comment I made earlier about sustainability in general and figuring out another way to pay for services that are needed in that community.
Yeah, if you want that kind of a level of service, then you have to match with the Bethesda rate.
They are, it's really weird.
Or figure out another model.
Or figure out another model.
Right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Maybe we should.
All right, so as council staff understands, the committee 2 to 1 is going to keep the rates at fiscal 19 for all parking spaces, contingent on a community meeting in Silver Spring as determined between the committee and DOT. The only thing staff wants to make sure is clarified, and I'll give DOT a chance to clarify this as well. Staff understands that the phased-in approach that the executive is thinking about for Silver Spring does not include weekend hours. The only hour enforcements that are going to change, given the way DOT has presented it, will be just going to later hours in fiscal '21 on weekdays, but weekends are not on the table yet, and I just wanted to make sure that was clear for the public record. Thank you. And with that said, I think that should be part of the community meeting, or at least I'd recommend that the phased approach get communicated here very clearly, so that when we come back again in another year and talk about enforcement hours or rates or anything like that, that's all just done in kind of
Yeah,
one.
I don't want to have this discussion next year.
Thank you.
So last comment. So the rate increase this year is really same services. It's really the cost increase is compensation, right? That's the cost increase in the budget. So.
And CIP, the projects that we do, we do.
Right. But the increment this year, the additional expenses, really, it's the compensation of the county employees.
And
Seems like,
operations.
yeah. But the delta is really the compensation piece. It seems like we ought to be willing to fund the compensation.
To explain, because we do all of our security through contract. Maintenance is through contract.
I'm
Revenue
not saying there's
collection.
anything wrong with
No, what I'm saying
compensation
is-
increases in this budget. I'm not disputing that or saying that they shouldn't be there. I'm just observing.
I understand, but
the-
it's
the
a-
expense is for compensation, and I think we support compensation, and this is how we pay for it.
Yes, it's a smaller portion of this is in the compensation for them.
All right.
Okay, we good?
Correct.
Village?
I don't think we need to address that, since the
No objection.
proposal is going to remain the same anyway, and we can address that in a future resolution if the committee wants to keep the rates the same for Fenton Village. The gated garages, the chamber, our staff will note that the chamber did support the idea of having garages gated all the time. This would require a fee for a lost ticket or a maximum daily charge, primarily because the way it works right now is if the gates are up, you can leave for free, and if the gates are down, then you get charged based on how many hours you're there for enforcement. So if you get in right an hour before the gates would, or the enforcement hours end, you would only pay that hour, and then everything else would be free.
Right. Mr. Rushdie, can I, or Mr. Tamana, I have a technical question. Without charging for evening hours, as we currently do not, couldn't you keep the gates down and set the machines so that they're still issuing a ticket for everybody that enters, and then tickets for cars who entered before 9 o'clock get charged as they're leaving after 9 o'clock?
Actually, that's what we are doing.
Okay.
Yes.
That is.
Yes, that's operational.
Misunderstood. Great.
We're doing that because we noticed that some people are coming after the gate goes up and leave without paying for the duration that they were in the garage.
And you can do that without charging people who come in after 9 o'clock?
Of course.
Correct.
Because the timing is on the.
Right, okay, thanks. Can I ask another, while we're on
Please.
garage and revenue? I'm sure you can't wait.
You're the chair, you can ask what you want.
Anyway, he said it was a pleasure dealing with us, and I know
course.
it's not always a pleasure. Ad revenue. I have talked to Peterson companies and others who have suggested, hey, we want cleaner garages, nicer place, why don't we get any ad revenue from these garages?
Well, again, it's the revenue. It's all driven by revenue. We do housekeeping, we do all kinds of cleaning.
I don't understand. Why don't we have ads and more ads?
We did do a pilot for ads in the garages. We
I thought
had-
so.
Yes. we
What
did.
happened?
We had very limited success, and the ads are still up, and we're using them for advertising public transport and all these other things like BRT or anything else. But we're not getting the paid ad revenue that we thought that we would get.
Did you work with the consultant that Peterson recommended?
Not with his consultant, but we did talk to Clear Channel and to other people that does marketing and ads for Ride On and other parts of the agency.
I'd suggest you work with the consultant. I think that I sent you that Peterson had recommended, that thought there'd be a lot of interest.
We will talk to him to send us in.
It can't hurt, right? It's a
doesn't
phone
hurt,
call.
no.
They were very confident that we could be raising more ad revenue from our garages.
We did meet with them before we did this pilot. We met with them, talked to them, and discussed what we were doing, and but we did not use their specific consultant.
And while we're here, is there any update on the vendor that was interested in essentially Easy Pass for garages? The window sticker?
No, Easy Pass,
Bless
a lot of cars have Easy Pass, which they don't want to use to coming into our facility. I thought about that years ago.
And we don't mean Maryland Easy Pass, I'm just using that as a shorthand, but a window sticker.
We have a
could be
license
pre-registered.
plate recognition. We are exploring to make that a possibility, so you can go online and register your vehicle, and we recognize it when you come to our facility, and then you just go out. And the other thing is, our fine revenue has dropped because of all the other different programs that we offer, that people have a lesser chance of getting a ticket. So that's the other part.
But you weren't interested in that technology. I thought that was pretty neat, because it had not just revenue metering, the possibility for dynamic pricing in the garages, and also security benefits, because you know exactly who's going in and going out, and you could keep out cars that you didn't want to enter your garages.
So we are exploring that technology right now. We actually have a RFP out on the street right now to look at having permanent LPRs installed in facilities, so we can see who's coming in and who's going out. And then at a later stage, once we have that, looked at, we can tie it into the payment system, where if you've registered with an account and we recognize your license plate, the gate would go up, and when you exit, the gate would go up and it would deduct from your account. But we're not there yet. We're looking at
But you
that.
have an RFP out. Okay, I didn't know that. I thought you weren't interested. Okay. Well, that's encouraging. Thank you. Good. Mr. Smith.
Very good. I would say, based on the recommendation from the committee, issues related to garage 60 and 61, their rates will remain the same as they were in fiscal 19, and special permits will remain the same as fiscal 19 until the greater community conversation, is my interpretation for those items for Silver Spring. And so my understanding, the staff's understanding is we are finished with Silver Spring in terms of rates.
I'd love to be. Okay.
Very good.
Great.
Wheaton is the opposite of Silver Spring in terms of how the executive is planning to approach it. So the proposal is to increase enforcement hours from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. all days that there is enforcement currently, with the second phase coming in fiscal 21 with a rate increase for that. Unlike Silver Spring, the PLD in Urban District in Wheaton is supported slightly differently, but this is continued revenue issues within the Wheaton PLD to support its cost of services that it's currently providing. The only other thing that I'll note is this is also going to be timed somewhat with the new government office building, which is hopefully going to increase foot traffic and other traffic that's going to be showing up in Wheaton.
Mr. Roshdi, I've been in touch with the district council member for Wheaton, who happens to be the council president, and she had a request that we not pursue extending the hours there until the construction is done, because of the disruptive construction you're very familiar with in Wheaton. How do you feel about that?
Well, you will be in negative in FY '21 immediately. It's a little bit even steeper than Silver Spring.
We also received a fair amount of feedback from the restaurant and business community that they were having issues with the early end to enforcement, that the on-street inventory, which is largely what they rely on in Wheaton, was getting used by residents of the nearby apartments who are avoiding parking in their own buildings because it's more affordable, obviously, for them to park on the street, so it was impacting the business operations negatively. I don't know what the council president has heard about that, but that was some of the input that went into this recommendation.
Have you met with her?
Not on this topic.
Well, there was a number of complaints in one of the Wheaton WUDAC meetings, and some of the restaurants owners were complaining that the residents park in those spaces right after 6 p.m. And in order to resolve this issue, then if you take it to 10 p.m., you will guarantee that those spaces are not taken by residents who wants to park overnight, and they go to facilities.
How soon is the construction done?
Construction will be done July of next year.
Mr. Smith? That you were hitting your mic.
You were looking at me like you were going to ask a question. I'm sorry, I was just getting my mic ready.
Colleagues?
You're not raising rates, it's just a matter of extending the hours of collection.
So this gets back to the model issue. and trying to figure out if this business model even works, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the executive is cut funding for the Wheaton, either, again, I'm going to interchange CBD and PLD, but for downtown Wheaton, the WUDAC, or I guess I'll call it the WUDAC, have services been cut to that in this budget?
The recommended budget for the Wheaton Urban District does reduce services based on the need to cut general fund transfers to the Wheaton Urban District. The actual Wheaton PLD supports the urban district just at 1% of its cost. So the Wheaton PLD does not support the urban district the same way the Silver Spring PLD supports the Silver Spring Urban District, but you are correct, they're one and the same in terms of the fiscal issues.
I think I understood that. And therein lies part of the problem. So services have been cut to the Wheaton Urban District, and here we are noting the difficulties with the construction, which are real, and I'm
Actually, that construction is going to bring new revenue that doesn't exist.
I understand that when it's online, when the building is online, right? And so waiting, I think, as Mr. Hucker said, his inclination was to wait until that building, or was that President Navarro's?
Yes.
Yeah. But even if we delay that, and as you said, that FY21, which is currently going to be negative 5.7%, that'll be worse in another year or two. I'm just going to, again, state that I think we need to rethink these models. And we can't do it in this work session. But between this and Silver Spring and Bethesda, and Bethesda a few years ago, it's not working.
Maybe to help
It is
out.
working in Bethesda because the tax cut in Bethesda was much smaller. The Wheaton has always had financial difficulties because there's not that many facilities and there is not that much revenue. So the general fund has I guess in the past, has injected funds into Wheaton PLD. In Silver Spring, again, the whole thing is because of the lack of that $8 million a year tax revenue, which is no longer, nobody's paying that tax in Silver Spring.
Well, and in Silver Spring, the idea of having a public education forum was to explain to people where these services, why the revenue is needed and the services that are being provided, which would be status quo services. And here, while the rates aren't increasing, but the hours are increasing, there's going to be a decrease in services from other aspects of the budget, which is what we've just been told. Correct, right.
So maybe
That's
to
a
help
problem.
out, Mr. Glass, and since the Fed chair is also sitting here, maybe a Fed T&E committee, joint committee session sometime this fall, looking at the financial structures of both the PLD and the urban districts and other long-term strategies to solve this problem?
Just suggesting that.
Yes.
All right, very good. Well,
Sheriff Ed.
Okay.
He's got
sorry,
a,
then I should yield and let the,
Well, I mean, and I had said earlier, I think we ought to be looking at the big picture here and how the urban districts work, and could we look at a bid and all these kinds of things. So I think we're all in agreement that we could be doing a better job supporting our urban areas, and there's a lot of different paths to go down there. I think right now we're just talking about parking meter revenue. That's all we're talking about. And so, you know, we have a proposal here that raises the hours of enforcement. Is that basically all this does?
Yes.
And the concern that you've heard is that, which makes sense actually, if you live in a building there and you'd have to pay for parking in the building, now you get home at 6:15, you put your car in a street space and you're good until you have to get in the morning and go to work. There's free parking at night. So that's nice if you have free parking, but if you want spaces open for restaurants and nighttime economy there, then, you know, that could be an issue. So you're saying that's what you found when you talked to businesses there. I don't know how much adding a couple bucks to, I don't even know if it would be that much with the hourly rate, if you're going to necessarily be able to move the needle, but I think it makes sense policy-wise that, you'd raise the hours of enforcement to support the businesses. This is not to hurt the businesses, this is to support them. Same thing we went through. I would say just generally on these things, there's no easy answer. If you're willing to go with what a small group of people say on this issue every time, then you never make a change. So, this is just an uncomfortable issue. Nobody likes it. You got to deal with parking meter rates. You got to deal with garage rates. It's no fun. But what are we supposed to do? So if you're saying that you got legitimate feedback from the businesses there, that they are concerned about people freeloading essentially on the spaces that they need, then I'm willing to support it. That's fine. I don't know that the council president necessarily got the chance to hear that from you. She may not have before she asked for this change. I don't know. We'll find out when we go to full council.
I find that to be a compelling argument that the businesses are actually hurting under the current structure because the residents are squatting spaces that would otherwise go to patronize businesses in the evening hours. I think that is legitimate. And after this, we'll be making a decision in a few minutes, but I'll speak to the regional service director, which I hadn't had the thought of doing before this conversation. I don't know if either of you have, to see what she thinks about this and to get her take. But it is a compelling argument.
Excuse me, Lindsay Lucas from OMB, to follow up from your statement. So when we discussed the increase of hours in Wheaton, we did involve the Wheaton Urban District to see what their feedback would be from the residents, and they were all very supportive as well. And so the regional service director also was part of that. Yes, she has heard a lot of complaints from the restaurants and the local businesses there that they would support this because they were seeing that there was enough parking available for customers.
Thank you for that information, and I'll support your recommendation.
Unanimous, or?
She's one expert, the local council member is. I prefer to stick with the district council member. Thank you. Okay, next.
The last one is a new fee for temporary parking meter removal and bagging due to construction. The fees are going to be added to encourage construction companies to utilize the bagging and removal in a timely manner and in an understood manner. The council has received a couple comments regarding this new fee, mostly negative, but the council staff supports it in terms of trying to free up staffing hours in the DOT and other things from having to worry about whether meters need to be removed or bagged during construction hours.
I have a question about this. So I just want to understand, first of all, what you're saying. You're saying that basically by charging a fee, now the onus is going to, the business has the incentive to self-manage how long the meter is out of commission, and therefore you can pull back from having to manage that because today it's on you to figure out when the business no longer needs it? Is that what you're saying?
No, actually, what we are proposing applies only to construction contractor. We are not proposing this change for tour buses or when there is an event and one of these businesses along the street. We will accommodate them as we have always. The thing with the construction companies has come to a point that is convenient for them to basically ask for the meters to be bagged. And it hurts the businesses because it takes 3-4 meters in front of some of these restaurants. And we see no activity, or sometimes they use it for parking their truck, or they're expecting a delivery, but they don't know when, so it's very inexpensive, so they would ask us to bag the meters. And we keep hearing from the businesses, especially restaurants, and then with all the construction that is going on in Bethesda, I probably the highest level of complaint that I received was, how can they bag meters and nothing is happening? So we want to take away that issue of convenience for the construction contractors, including utility companies, when they want to do something. So it's a fee that we're going to charge. We make sure that they're paying, so therefore they're not asking for bagging a meter for their own convenience in the construction.
What about like really big construction projects, right? Where clearly,
Not unreasonable, sir,
you know,
because
there's a fence up, you know, the parking is out of commission. How does it work under those?
actually, I know construction. All my life, I was involved with construction. There are many times that the construction is the convenient for the general contractor to have that lane taken away. It's honestly that way. Construction happens all over in New York, in Washington D.C., in many cities, and you don't see as much lane taken away or parking spaces taken away as often that this does in our community. And as I said, again, this was only to make sure that if somebody needs to take a parking space out of service, it's really for real construction and is not for the convenience or free parking space for the contractors.
Is there a cap on the amount that a?
Well, what we are doing is we only asking $100 in advance because it's costing us, by the way. The rate before was costing us because we have to get the contractor to go in and bag the meter, take picture because there's sometimes when they bag it in the night before, there is cars in there, so we want to make sure the enforcement officer doesn't go and ticket that car. Then the other thing is go on unbagging because contractor cannot do it. Then we have to communicate with the enforcement officers. So there is a cost associated with this. What we are asking is charging at $2 only for the collection hours. So we're not asking to charge them for nighttime or weekends if there's no charge. But actually, this will be a deterrent for those who just want to do it for convenience, a day or two. If they can do the job without closing the parking space in the business district, it will do that.
It's $100 one time?
$100 the first hour, and then after that, $2 per hour.
Okay, so it's not, and then the next day, it's another $100 or?
No. The next day is, again, the continuation of the $2 plus the revenue loss, yeah.
And I understand the Bethesda Chamber is supportive of this proposal. You've talked to them about that?
I talked to them, they had a number of questions about, for example, there are construction that is long-term, and even those construction that is long-term, sometimes it is legit that they have to take away. But I don't think we are asking for something that is unreasonable, and we are not asking them to pay for their spaces on, let's say, Saturday, Sunday, or at nighttime. This is only the hours that the meters are operating, or at least available for businesses.
I'll jump in real quick, because the Bethesda Chamber did communicate concern that the language is unclear about how the first hour of bagging works if the bag remains on to the next day. So given that, I mean, staff feels like it's clear, but if,
In other words, they were
were
concerned that the $100 would,
again,
was
the
a
next
morning, every morning it was a new 100, but that's not what it is.
That's not the case,
So
no.
since we're all in agreement on that, I just wanted to clarify that. And I think the language is also clear in the resolution.
I think we're good.
Very good.
Mr. Rushdie, actually, did you ever combine the Montgomery Hills parking lot
Yes, we
district
did.
with Silver Spring?
Yes.
Great, thanks.
We only have 3 PLDs as of last year.
Thank goodness. That was the bill that was passed. Great, thanks.
Well, that finishes item 1. The resolution that will be presented to the council will note the 2-1 votes in the various ways they occurred. It'll go before the council. Also, the final resolution will include whatever hours Kids Right Free receives off of the reconciliation list, and so that will be codified in that as well for the council's final approval. We'll go ahead and move on to item number 2, which are the PLDs and the related CIP amendments that the executives proposed. I think for the sake of time, council staff will move rather quickly through these. So for the fiscal of 20, the executive recommends a $28,289,292 for all 3 parking districts. We've talked a little bit about the fiscal structure, how they work. In particular, staff notes on page 5 some of the kind of overarching issues for all of 3 PLDs, including flat revenues versus growing expenditures. Currently in law, PLDs can make transfers. This also creates a problem when the transfer is needed because of one PLD being fiscally unhealthy. However, it may not be fiscally healthy again for a while, which creates a longer-term kind of Rubik's Cube of terms of when transfers go back and forth and we get everybody back to parity. And also, security hours, we've talked about a lot. The only thing staff will add to that is that the county funds security for our urban districts through a variety of means, not just through the PLDs, and this is security only related to the PLDs, not to the general urban district. I'm going to go ahead and jump into Bethesda PLD because there's several transfer items, and all of the transfer items related to the PLDs need to be taken up by the council if they're going to happen this year. The PLD in Bethesda is fiscally healthy throughout the fiscal plan that the executive has submitted. And this includes the fact that the PLD makes debt service payments, and they'll continue to make those debt service payments until fiscal 32. They also need about $8 million in reserve for the debt service payments. The staff notes it's almost $12 million that is tied up in the Bethesda PLD, and yet even with that, the Bethesda PLD remains healthy. Unfortunately, not healthy enough to make the $3 million transfer back to Silver Spring in fiscal 20 as was projected last year in the fiscal plan. Staff will note that based on the fiscal 18 resolution, we will need, if the council or the committee agrees, we would need to note in this resolution that Bethesda will repay the $3 million PLD costs in this year, and then we'll receive another $3 million transfer from Silver Spring, netting out zero because, again, there's not enough money in the Bethesda PLD to make the transfer fiscal 20, and then the payment will be in fiscal 21. I see Tom looking at me with question marks. So the council's resolution requires repayment by Bethesda PLD this year.
Right.
We have no choice.
Right.
However, the Bethesda PLD is not healthy enough to make that
Right.
transfer until Lot 43 sells. I'll note that Lot 43 is kind of the piece that's missing. So before the council right now is the disposition of Lot 43. The proceeds from that, once is received by Bethesda PLD, will be able not only to make this transfer, but all other subsequent transfers it needs to owe. And so once we have that, and if it occurs in fiscal 20, then the payment may come a little earlier. If it occurs in fiscal 21, it'll come then. But until then, the council resolution should reflect the fact that the loan will continue a little longer.
Which one is 43 again?
It's on Woodmont Avenue, 8009 Woodmont Avenue, I think is the address. I don't.
It's a small lot between Wisconsin and Woodmont. It's actually facing the Woodmont, and it's just fairly a small lot.
Right next to the diner?
It's right, no, it's next to that huge building which is going up now. It's like
Yes.
8 or 9 story apartment house.
Further north.
So,
Imagination stage. Oh, yeah, okay.
near DeMarco's Pizza, across the street from that.
Your neighborhood spot. All right.
All right.
Great.
The Bethesda PLD is also anticipated to make another loan to Wheaton PLD this year. So the council resolution will need to note that. Council staff notes that though the fiscal plan shows repayment over different years, the resolution just should note that the entire loan will be repaid by fiscal 24, just to ensure we give flexibility to the Wheaton PLD based on that repayment.
Without objection.
All right. In addition, the Bethesda PLD will make $2.2 million in transfers to the Silver Spring PLD in fiscal 22 and 23 for its portion of the service facility that was completed in Silver Spring for all parking spaces in all three PLDs. The council doesn't need to do anything with that. Staff just notes that the Silver Spring PLD will receive $5.2 million in the fiscal plan from Bethesda over the next 3 or 4 years. And then, as always, the Bethesda PLD is anticipated to continue to make its urban district transfers commensurate of what it's been doing.
Okay.
And that, excuse me,
How much is that again?
on page 4, the Bethesda Urban District will receive approximately $1.6 million in fiscal 20 from the PLD.
Okay.
We've talked extensively about the fiscal health of both the Silver Spring and the Wheaton PLD, but given the decisions for the rates, staff will note that both of the districts have sufficient funding in fiscal 20 to maintain where they're at regardless of those rates. Given the conversation in the fall, hopefully we will come back and revisit that so that we know where we're at in fiscal
He
21.
said in the summer. June is, I heard Mr. Harker say June is when we're doing
Sorry.
some outreach. Unless you were talking about something, the broader thing about urban districts generally and all that stuff. That's bigger than this specific issue.
I was speaking about the specific issue.
That's,
I considered June a summer month.
I thought you said fall. Never
I'm
mind.
sorry, following the summer conversation,
Okay.
Mr. Hucker did mention we would possibly revisit this resolution, the previous resolution in the fall, because it needs to get introduced, discussed by a public hearing. It would have to go through committee again. We wouldn't be able just to, the council could not just change the rates at will. They would need to go through a public hearing process to change the resolution, so that would take a few weeks.
Likely just a quick afternoon hearing because we've already had a full public
Correct.
vetting.
And, yeah.
Beautiful thing.
Other than that, there are two amendments before the council. These amendments are to provide appropriation authority, additional appropriation authority, because the way the executive contracts, they have to encumber the funds and they need to execute contracts. And so council staff recommends approval of the executive's amendments to the two PDFs before the committee. Okay,
That's good.
then we are done,
Great.
with me at least.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, gentlemen.
We're on item 3.
Item 3.
Okay, item 3 is a review of the White Oak Local Area Transportation Improvements Program, in particular, one aspect to a proposal made by the Duffy companies. Mr. Reamer asked for this briefing. Just a couple sentences of background, turn over then to Al and to Chris. A couple years ago, as a follow-up from the subdivision staging policy, the council decided that in White Oak, a way of meeting the local area review requirements was, instead of requiring each developer to do a traffic study for their project, figure out which intersections needed to be widened or which TMD item needed to be done. Rather, it would be sort of a pay-and-go situation where basically you create a program of improvements that needs to be done, local area type improvements in White Oak, figure out the costs of that, and then divide that by the number of trips generated by the new development that's under the master plan. And the council went through that process in early 2017 and came up with this program, which charges, I think it's $5,000 and change per trip for each new development that comes in. And if they make that payment, they pass the local area review requirement. The Duffy companies has made a proposal for improvements in the area around Hillendale, Powder Mill Road, intersection with New Hampshire Avenue, Elton Road intersection with New Hampshire Avenue. That was the one element in the plan, which is on the Local Area Transportation Improvements Program, which is on page circle 2, which is costed out as $5 million, is the arrows pointing to it. But that was the only project of this entire list that really didn't have any detailed analysis. This is really sort of a gimme number, not really knowing what was going to come out of this, because there are all kinds of things that could have been done in this area. Following from that, the Duffy companies come in and said, look, we want to do some improvements to this area because we have developments that are going on there. And they proposed a program which would do 4 or 5 things. And one of those things is to create a slip ramp from Elton Road, which intersects New Hampshire Avenue just north of the Beltway, and extending it west so it meets the southbound to westbound ramp. And that's has a lot of pros and cons and a lot of division in the community. So that is the background. I think at this point, turn it over to Al and Chris from there.
Sure, and I don't know if you have questions you want us to specifically address, or I can describe more of this process beforehand. It's up to you how you want to handle it.
Thank you. It was okay. So it was my understanding that this project was moving forward, that it had DOT and SHA support, and then something changed in December, and now you're back to doing some studies. Is that have I described the facts?
Those are, yes, a portion of the facts. As Glenn mentioned, the Duffy companies came to us saying, you know, this is a problem that wasn't adequately solved from a technical point of view in the LATIP. We have this proposal of things we could do that could address the problem here. We said, well, go ahead and give us the analysis of that. We'll look at it. We'll determine whether we think that's a true statement or not, and we'll vet that with the State Highway Administration. So they gave us technical analysis of this proposal. We said, yes, this does address the congestion issue at the Powder Mill intersection and New Hampshire Avenue. State Highway also looked at this and said, yes, this proposed improvement addresses the congestion issue at Powder Mill and 650. We then said, this is not the project that is in the LATIP, because it's actually the bulk of the work was at a different intersection, one that's not listed in the LATIP. It's at Elton Road in 650.
Even though the congestion relief is at Powder Mill
Correct.
Road.
So we said, well, we have to have a process by which we would replace this project for the one that is in the LATIP. So we can't just go ahead and do that. So what we did is we said we need to have some community review of this issue. We had an open house in May of last year where we said there's a proposal to substitute the placeholder project for this improvement at Elton Road and some other, 4 or 5 other improvements that are part of it. What's community sentiment on that? And there was an enormous backlash at this because it had opened up some old questions of previous proposals from I don't know who and when, but it had been proposed in the past that this ramp get connected. And it actually had been connected as part of a construction sequencing at some time. That took us by surprise. We didn't expect there to be a significant community issue with that. So we slowed down and we said we need to look at this more closely. We had a series of community meetings. We actually had 6 different formal open community meetings, plus a host of other conversations with the Duffy companies and Prince George's County. And we tried to understand what are these cut-through traffic issues that people are concerned about, and does this project address the need? And we remain convinced that this project does address the congestion issue. But it was inducing all of these concerns from the residential neighborhood that's behind the commercial area that fronts New Hampshire Avenue, about 2/3 of which is in Prince George's County. We didn't come to a point where we had a successful resolution of the cut-through traffic issues. And to be fair, we did not judge the opinions of the Prince George's County residents different than those in Montgomery County. You know, we can't just
There are people
export our impacts to another jurisdiction. So we made the determination, knowing that this development is quite advanced, in fact, the hotel is open at this point, that we had to make a decision that allowed this process to move forward. So we had our public hearing where we received a large volume of public testimony. There's disagreement about what percent is in favor, what percent is opposed to this measure.
Can you characterize that? Because what I've heard is that it's basically mostly in favor of the slip ramp.
There was a lot of testimony in favor. There was. I don't know. I don't remember what we said in the packet was in favor. It was mixed. And there was significant opposition from the residential community, both in Montgomery and Prince George's County, about this cut-through traffic concern. What we decided to do is there are several elements of this proposal that were not controversial. Improvements at the Powder Mill and 650 intersection. Those improvements we judged to have long-term value in addressing the congestion issues here. So the decision in the hearing examiner's report that Al endorsed was to allow the substitution of the improvements at 650 and allow the developer to seek the credits that they would be eligible for if they implemented those with us. And we're in the process of approving their application for those. The issue at the Elton slip ramp said this would still be a component of a project that could address these needs, but we didn't solve the problems that people had raised about the cut-through traffic issue. So we need to take a step back and we need to understand, is there a resolution to that cut-through traffic problem or not?
Now, just to pause on that. My understanding is that there is a resolution. It's just that the Prince George's County DOT has not yet said that they'll adopt that resolution.
Well, and they haven't agreed with we feel that it could be addressed, but there is an agreement among State Highway, Prince George's County, and us that something would get implemented there. And there was enough unanswered technical question that we weren't going to just say, yes, we feel we've solved this problem. So good luck, residents of Prince George's County, getting this solution implemented. So the project was able to move forward. They're able to get the credits they need for this project. What we are going to do is do a more thorough look at the cut-through traffic issue to see if that can indeed be a solution that the various parties can agree to, the 2 counties in the state. And we also didn't have a good basis of comparison.
Say that again. You're going to look at the issue that has yet to be embraced by the Prince George's County government.
Yes, and SHA.
And the state to see if you can get consensus on that.
Correct. And we are also doing a more robust analysis of what improvements at 650 and Powder Mill itself would be needed to address this issue, so that we can have a cost-benefit comparison between the Elton slip ramp and making all the improvements at Powder Mill Road.
Didn't the master plan sort of contemplate the Elton lip ramp? I mean, I know I've been hearing about it for years.
No.
I don't think it's in the master plan, no. That's actually a level of detail wouldn't necessarily be in a master plan, but it's not explicitly in a master plan.
So this is the first project that's gone through this program, so we learned a lot about the processing of this, and we've refined the procedure that we'll use to entertain these proposals for other projects in the future. And I expect that there will be. There's nothing perfect about the work we did before on concepts, and when somebody's working in that area, they may come up with another idea. So I think we will go through this again, but we've been more clear about the process we're going to use to do this going forward. And then the other element of this is we intend to post the scope of that study by this time next week. We have the draft from the consultant, and we're just making sure we agree with what they proposed, and that'll be posted for public review. There'll be a couple weeks for people to let us know whether they think we have enough covered in that scope or not, and then we'll proceed with that effort. I don't think there's anything in particular being held up at this point. The next project in this area would be from the same applicant, the Hillendale Gateway. We have a little bit of time before their payments would be due and time to resolve this issue. We hope to have that work concluded over the summer and have another public meeting, public hearing, and then make a substitution for the placeholder project so that this will have a defined set of improvements here. It has been difficult for all the parties engaged. The community had to deal with an unexpected issue of a project they hadn't contemplated and hadn't been reviewed during the LATIP coming before them. We did everything we could to make sure there was strong community engagement around this, knowing that it was a controversial decision. The applicant thought...
Can I just pause a little bit just to,
Yep.
put this into simpler terms, make sure I understand it. So this is the issue that if you're coming out of the Hillendale Shopping Center and you want to go towards Tacoma Park or DC or Silver Spring downtown, and you're not going to go up New Hampshire and then back around, you have to go up to Powder Mill and you have to make a U-turn in order to come back down. If you come out the bottom of the shopping center, you could go out the north, I suppose, but.
Correct.
And so the concern is that if you create a direct connection onto the Beltway, that people will then use that from Prince George's County.
Correct.
They'll take that path instead of coming in on Powder Mill Road to get onto the Beltway.
Correct.
And the way to prevent that is to get some kind of restriction on your access to keep people on Powder Mill.
The most effective ways to do that are in Prince George's County.
And the most effective ways to do that are in Prince George's County, right? And why haven't they yet gotten on board with that?
Well, they don't have the urgency we have to solve this problem because it's not holding up a development application in Prince George's County.
As far as they're concerned, they could get 2 access
Yeah.
routes rather than 1 or something like that.
Well, I don't think they're gaming this. It's just,
Okay.
it just didn't get resolved in the time frame we needed to resolve it to meet the needs of this particular project. I don't think they're bad actors or gaming the situation.
All right, I guess I was being humorous there.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're going to continue to work with them to
Absolutely.
get that decision made?
Absolutely.
Are you doing any more studies? You're doing,
Yes.
but you are doing more studies.
Correct.
So what happens if the study says there's another solution for Powder Mill?
Great, we'll adopt that solution.
Great, we'll adopt that
We won't
solution.
do the Elton Road ramp.
We won't do the Elton Road. Wow.
I don't know where Toto and Alice are, but
That is, I tell you, I feel like we're in the middle of one. I don't know that I've seen it that dark outside at 3:30. That's crazy. I mean, I guess I'd like to know what the property owner would have to say about switching projects. If, as far as I know, they've been working on this for years under the assumption that this was all good, and then it kind of got derailed.
well, I don't know how long they worked on it. They brought it to us in late 17, early 18, and we started this community process in May of 18. They don't have to implement anything. They can pay us their fee, and it's up to us to solve the problem at that point.
Well, I think they want to
But
have
they want to make the
more
improvements. and we're
functional
trying to
area
help them.
for, the success of their business. I mean, which sort of gets down to the underlying thing, which is this is about our ability to partner with business and
And all along, we have said we would prefer for the person building a project to implement the improvements at that project rather than us take money and then try to figure out how to prioritize the program.
Mr. Collins, what's the solution you're suggesting on the Prince George's side? I'm not sure I remember that.
There are a couple, but the most obvious one is a street called Wooded Way, which is essentially extension of Elton Road, to make it a one-way connection out to Riggs Road in Prince George's County. That would eliminate most of the draw through that residential community for people trying to access the Beltway.
And how engaged has PGDOT been in the?
They were very engaged. They scheduled a public meeting in Prince George's County with their staff and their residents that we participated in. We've met with them several times in their office.
Do they agree with you
Their
on this?
directors and leadership has changed since this first phase
Yes.
of the process, so we'll have some, we'll have to go through that again with them.
They agree with you on the solution?
They did not take a position on the solution.
Has their council member been engaged?
Their council member is also brand new. We worked with their outgoing council member who's now state delegate.
Right.
So yes, we have to re-engage with a new set of people in Prince George's County on this
Okay.
issue.
Let me know if I can help with that.
Okay.
Can we hear from the property owner?
Yeah.
And then,
Do we have
if a
any-
community person wants to
Any
come up,
comments
that's-
from the
that's
property owner, from Mr. former Mayor Fosselman?
For the record, my name is Shane Poland.
Okay.
I'm the Director of Development of the Duffy Companies. Again, the Duffy Companies, we're a family business. We were headquartered in Hillendale for 40 years. And we're very concerned about the transportation and making improvements to transportation in Hillendale. We're partners with the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County on Hillendale Gateway. We've just opened our new LEED Platinum Hotel on Elton Road. And we don't want to just pay and go. We actually want to do what we thought was what was wanted by county government, which was, and by DOT, which was to have the interested parties both help to identify needed improvements and be willing to step up and make the necessary improvements. Having had the opportunity to listen to some of the other T&E items and how much of a struggle it is to find funding and how we're going to actually implement some of the much needed improvements in this county, it has been shocking to me that here we are as a family and as the county's housing authority, HOC, standing with a giant check, trying to put it into the roads, and have found ourselves unable basically to do so. In terms of any mischaracterization or what there is or disagreement as to what the record was, we started this process probably 2 years ago, so I'm happy we're talking about this now so that Hillendale Gateway doesn't come and go in that process. We did the study. DOT understood we were coming forward and that we would likely do the study, and I encourage Chris can, if I misstate anything, that we would be coming and we would be willing to make the investment. You see things like funding for design. We funded design. We could have written a check, but we didn't. We actually funded design. We've got our transportation engineers here. We submitted to DOT. We engaged the community. DOT did a good job, a great job engaging the community, had multiple meetings, multiple displays. I can't say how surprising it is or isn't. I think it was not a surprise to anybody that people were concerned about cut-through traffic associated with the ramp that we've been encouraging as a traffic solution here for a long time. And for that reason, DOT did a great job of putting out a series of options for what to do to address cut-through. But no matter our best attempts, we could not get the community to engage on those solutions, on those 5 solutions. We had them, they were on boards, they were at everything. It was not a surprise that this was going to be a concern, and DOT did a great job of saying, hey, we all recognize that was a concern, how do we try to address it? If you go, I encourage your staffs, I'm sure you guys are busy, just go look at the record, go read the record, and just put one in a pile if it says yes, and one in a pile if it was against the improvements. And you can report back. What you'll find is that over 80% of the respondents from Montgomery County were in favor of making improvements, over 80%. And notwithstanding all of that support and all of our time and all of our effort and us standing there with a check, somehow all of the improvements were approved except for the most material improvement, which was the ramp. So I appreciate your effort to try to see what we can do to push this project off of go because Gateway will be coming. We want to make improvements to the road. We're working with DOT to use the funding from the hotel, and we appreciate their flexibility in working with us. So we're doing what we can with the money that we've got to make investments in local. But by the time Hillendale Gateway gets here, we really need to make some material improvements and look forward to getting the study going, underway, and we feel strongly are going to reach if there were low-hanging fruit, they were easy to find, they would have been found decades ago while we've been trying to solve this. But we look forward to moving.
Okay.
Glenn, is there anything we can do as a council?
I think really at this point, it's still within DOT and trying to work this out with Prince George's and State Highway. I mean, you set aside, you created the program, the LATIP. It does allow for developers like the Duffy companies to do the project instead and get a credit against the LATIP. You can get involved with it. Mr. Hucker, for example, suggests that he might be willing to participate to some degree to get some kind of agreement together. But there's no formal action the council, I don't think, should take at this time. Because at some point, you'll need to revise the LATIP program because the $5 million project won't be a $5 million project anymore, and it'll be more defined. Like I said at the beginning, that was the one project that was ill-defined. But until then, I think not. I just want to point out, if you want to hear from the residents' point of view, Ms. Eileen Finnegan is also here, talk from the Hillendale Civic Association, if you'd like to
Do you have anything to add, Ms. Finnegan? Or Pete? We got to wrap this up soon, but I'd love to.
I'll just make it very quick. I participated in the White Oak Science Gateway Master Plan, and to answer your earlier question, actually the slip ramp was specifically not included in the master plan because of some of these issues. And so we looked forward to somehow resolving this in a holistic way. There are lots of questions in Hillendale, not just the Powder Mill, New Hampshire Avenue intersection, but also Riggs and Powder Mill, which council kind of punted on, saying that maybe there'll be a 50% Montgomery County participation in that intersection. Those two intersections are what drive the cut-through traffic. There is a lot of documentation on this. There's also a lot of history. And to specifically address one point that I thought I heard Mr. Reamer, is that if you come out of the Hillendale Shopping Center and want to go south to Tacoma or the district, you can come out on Elton Road and make a left-hand turn and go south on New Hampshire Avenue.
But not the Beltway. You can't get on the Beltway.
You can get on the Beltway going east. Right. Yes, in order to go west on the Beltway, you do come out on Powder Mill Road and turn on to New Hampshire to access the west. But in making these changes of the slip ramp, it's not only induced traffic, but it is participating in additional cut-through traffic that currently uses Elton and Wooded going to Riggs, that would now be able to use Riggs to New Hampshire to the Beltway. Again, not to go into great detail, but there are other issues on New Hampshire Avenue that I hope will be looked at. For example, there's a new traffic light on the southbound 650 East exit, which was part of the Purple Line improvements. There's a new light there between Elton and Oakview, which is causing a tremendous amount of backup in the morning rush. We also have a lot of backup at Elton in the evening rush. So I think having a specific look and a very holistic look at the Hillendale issues may in fact provide the opportunity to air this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything to add?
Thank you, committee members. For the record, I'm Pete Fosselman from the Office of the County Executive, and my job is to implement particular master plans, and one of which is the White Oak Master Plan. I want to commend DOT for doing an excellent job in community outreach when in fact This type of issue doesn't normally go out to the community for consideration because if you recall, the prior council approved the LATIP. So this type of thing wouldn't go out. But because we saw it as a unique situation with the developer coming forward with a checkbook, proposing something that wasn't in the master plan, normally not all of it, we felt it should be brought to the community for get some input. I think we held at a minimum 6 different types of meetings, including a public hearing, maybe 7, I'd have to go back and count. And the majority of the letters, when I say majority, only 7 of the letters that were received from Montgomery County residents objected to these proposals. I'd also like to point out that the SHA has blessed this proposal, and that the Duffy companies are, and I'm not speaking for Duffy, I'm speaking from my own opinion, they're bringing something forward that the county executive is very adamant about, and that's affordable housing. They're working closely with the HOC. This fits into what the executive's trying to do. And I'm speaking for myself, once again, not for the executive at this point. And I think it's a great project that's much needed in White Oak. And as a professional planner, I also see these traffic mitigation solutions as something that would help the area, especially the greening and the traffic chokers being added to Elkton Road in front of the Coca-Cola plant and all the way down till you get to the Prince George's County line to match up with some of the mitigation that Prince George's County has also implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. I really appreciate your comments there. That was important what you just said. I mean, you got a lot of knowledge working in there day in and day out, and you know what the vision of the plan is and the importance of this improvement. But you also have experience that precedes your work in the county in the private sector and doing planning and engineering. And I agree. I think that this was all on board. Everything was fine until a county executive came in and decided to change course. That's what I see. That's what I see. So I think that we need to proceed to wrap this up as fast as possible. And DOT, I just ask for your engagement with Prince George's County right away. And let's see if we can't resolve this really fast, because the opinion of SHA and DOT previously was in support. Now we're doing more work and we're doing more study and we're doing more input. But the public record previously was pretty supportive. So let's try to get this done. We've got a company that wants to invest and improve the area to support economic development there, and we should get behind them. So
I want to assure you that my decision to concur with the hearing officer to do this study was not because of the county executive changing our approach. This hearing officer report came to me, and I was just looking at my dates that I signed it. It was March of this year, and it was independent of the county executive views on this issue.
well, why did you change your views then? Because the department had blessed this project.
I don't think
No,
so.
we found that this project addressed the congestion issue at the intersection and embarked on a public engagement process because it was different than what was included in the program. And the outcome of that public engagement process was mixed. And there was I invite you to come to the next meeting in Prince George's County on this topic. There's a significant concern about these issues, and we just did not get to the point of resolution on those cut-through traffic issues. And we may not, and we may end up recommending that improvements be concentrated at Powder Mill Road, which is the failing intersection. I don't know what outcome of that study will be, but the hearing examiner's report and Al's concurrence with it is reflecting the totality of the technical work and the public input that we received through that. And I know there's disagreement, and that's one of the things that's challenging about this, is that there are pros and cons to this solution. And we didn't feel that we had enough pros to outweigh the cons to make this determination. We made a determination that allowed the Duffy Company to make the investment in this area that actually, I believe, exceeds their payment obligation for the hotel. And there's time for us to resolve this before they are required to make any payment or make a commitment to another project for the Gateway project.
All right, you've responded. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.